like three things I wish I knew before becoming architect. So I will go into three things like how wrong I was. The first thing when I thought about architect, or what I was used to think, I will treat technology, as Ram said, business is important. I never thought business was important. So that was my first mistake, I would say. Business is very, very important. Means a lot of time we don't have a choice. We have visa, we needed a job, we took the job, whatever job came. We look for more money, we look for better coding. Are they using latest coding? So over the experiences I learned that business domain knowledge is very, very important. Means it depends upon if have knowledge of financial industry or not, whether you are manufacturing. So you need to have a domain depth, very important. Means I this is my personal experience that if you have a domain experience and you may lack some latest technical knowledge, you may still get the job. But if you have no domain knowledge, going as a director or enterprise architect is very hard sell. So that is my first lesson is like, okay, you if you could plan your career. I know some professionals who plan to be in healthcare industry. And like once was talking to a CIO, and I asked him, how did you become CIO? And I was shocked. He planned his career. He made sure he has exposure to clinical operations. He has uh, exposure to supply chain so that he knows the whole business of the enterprise. And that's how he became CIO. So second lessons I learned was like quality is important. Initially, I started okay, put as much as code possible. How much more lines of code I can give. So over the year, quality is also important. You need to make sure that your code is less buggy, is performing, it can scale. And the third lesson I learned, a lot of time, I don't know about you guys. I think I was introvert. Now I classify myself more extrovert. So I used to think, I'm not, I'm introvert. I'm good in technology. I don't want to deal with people. And, I will not become a project manager. I will become an architect so that I don't have to deal with people. I don't want to network with the people. So I think a software architect, they have to have more people skills than a manager. Managers, they have leverage. They manage goals. They have people reporting to them. They can have some authority. Whereas software architects, we have to build up our own personal chemistry to get things done. We have to convince people the architectural approach we are giving them solving some problems. We have to show them it can work. So the people skills, I think, for software architects is very, very important. So San, but what are things you wish you knew before becoming software architects? Three things.
Well, first of all, I just want to say that when I was a software developer, I didn't think that I would be, going in this direction, right? So I thought at that time, I don't know if you recall, people were like, "Oh, should I get an MBA? Maybe I'll become a manager," or
Exactly.
that never really thought that okay, I would become like this. But it just happened that, and as I started going into the direction, I'm like, "Oh, okay, it's something I like, I enjoy, and things like that, right?" Um, but one of the things that I never envisioned that I would have to be a better salesperson. And we despised salespeople back in those days. But now like you kind of have to sell, right? So you have to come up with a solution and strategy that you kind of collaborate with people and then try to sell it to the right people, and get buy-in. So that never I thought that I would have to do. Um, the other aspect is that I would say that um, you have to give up something, meaning uh, when you're coding, you're coding, you have a lot of control over it. And you might say that, okay, it should take certain amount of time to do certain things or certain quality, because I'm doing it or whatever. But once you start doing less of a code, more of a solution strategy and so on, you have to kind of give up that and trust that, engineer, developer who's doing that, who's doing it. I don't have to micromanage, things like before I would think that, okay, I know I have to be very closely involved, that otherwise there may not be quality. There may not be, something um, might not get done on time, things like that. But I'd realized later on that, hey, you know what? This is something I have to give up. I can't, you know, try to micromanage everything. It's like step back a little bit. So I didn't, I never thought that I would have to step back in some ways, but it's necessary. Yeah, those are a few things I can think of. Yes,
So like I when you were saying I have to give up something, I was thinking like you are talking you have to be pragmatic versus visionary. You may have a vision, very grand vision, and sometime you have to you have to worry about shipping to the market. uh,
Well, that too, because when you go throughout time, you always want to have an ideal solution, right? So you have an ideal vision. Okay, this is going to be how I want to design. That's just how I want to see it. But there's always sometimes, you have to compromise. You have to compromise. There are some cases. And, initially you think of that you would never have a tech debt. But guess what? Sometimes you do have to have a tech debt, so that you can move faster and hoping to come back to it and pay off that debt, so those things, yes, it's always there, because you don't, you know never anticipate that something that, would happen, but it does.
San, that is very interesting. Tech David, as a programmer, we are working on some assignment. We'll try to make sure whatever is under control, there's no tech debt. Whereas you're an architect, enterprise architect, you have to make a trade-off between technical debt. It's like, can companies have no loans on their balance sheet? No, they need to have some healthy debit so that they can operate and make profit, build something.
Right, right. Yeah, that is always the case. It's always challenging that, how you go back and pay that debt, but it's like, but things needs to be done and done fast. Things, you can't spend, and, you know, 6 months to do your ideal solution when the business needs it in 2 months,
Uh,
things like that. So that's always, yeah, there's always a trade-off, always
That's what
something
like
that
a
you have
lot
to.
of managers say. If it is working, don't mess with it. Don't fix it.
Mhm.
If nobody's complaining, it's working. Let's continue it.
Mm.
Ram, what are your three things you wish you knew before becoming architect?
See, you become an architect over a period of time. So once you become an architect, right, you realize how different this role is, right? As Ehsan said, there are things that you may have to give up just because that's the right solution for the situation rather than the ideal thing that you want to do. Most of the time, you come with a certain experience, you've implemented certain tool, you know it's working, you have some kind of bias towards it, right?
Yes.
Probably that's the ideal situation. But you go into an organization, you realize that they don't have that money to buy that. They don't have the resources to bring in to implement this project. So there is another way, right? You don't have an ideal situation, but you have the best of the situation for the current scenario that you are in, right? So sometimes you have to realize that you have to give in. No, there is no one way of doing things. There are multiple ways to do things, and you have to figure out the right approach for that organization. So when you get into this is a new lesson that you learn. Wow, I've been always successful doing this, but I cannot do this here, right? This is not the best thing for. That's a new lesson that you always learn once you become an architect, right? Again, nobody plans to become an architect. It happens. For some it happens in 6 years, for some it happens in 10 or 15 years, or some it happens in 10 years. So we don't know, right? So once you are put in a role, you get new kind of lessons. And second thing is, as you said, right, people always think that you are very proficient in technical things, you become an architect. You become an architect when you actually solve the business problems, right? So Raman, luckily for me, I've been always oriented towards solving business problems. There is never a technical problem for me. It is always a challenge. What am I solving for the business right from day one on the programming? So it kind of helped me to move towards it. So I've seen people, they're excellent in the programming. You tell them, hey, I want this to work, this work, this work. They will do it with no issues, great performance. You will have every efficient programming. But you ask them what such of problem they solved, they have no idea about it, right? So this is something like most of the architects I've seen, that's a new shift that they have to learn becoming an architect. They didn't know that, hey, you know what, knowing business problem or solving business problem is part of their responsibility. Man, lucky to me, I mean, it was never a problem, but I've seen people, getting into this problem. And the third thing is marketing your solution. As an architect, you have to get your buy-in from your stakeholders. When I say stakeholders, it right from the last person who is coding to all the way to CIO or no CFO, who is involved in this work, right? You have to get the buy-in from all of them. That means that you need to be able to articulate to the level the coder can understand. At the same time, you should be able to articulate to the level, yeah, C-level business executive can understand. So you have to learn that skill. When you become a first time an architect, you are struggling with this kind of a thing. Hey, I know what it is. I'm able to solve the left side of my problem. I'm not able to solve the right side of my problem, right? So those are some of the skills that you develop, which is a surprise to you because you always think that, hey, I know everything. I have 10 years experience solving the problem. You go there, suddenly your role might ask you to do certain things. So those are some of the things that people don't prepare for, uh, but it might help over a period of time hearing from people. Yeah.
Ram, like you brought very interesting thing, like uh, just you are technical doesn't mean you will become architect.